Hello and welcome to the Annie Altman Show, the podcast, season 5. Welcome to the 10th episode in the Humanity Change series. I am so lucky to be here today with my friend Samuel Junk, coming in live from Austin. We met in New York at the Woodstock Fruit Festival, and then we met up again on the Big Island. And Samuel is an anthropology student. He's a facilitator of authentic relating games and other connection and interaction games, and an all-around, what are the words for you as a human? A beautiful, open to change, very soft and very direct sort of a Samuel. Thank you for being here.
Thank you so much for having me.
I'd love for you to share a little bit about you in your own words for the listeners here. Who are you?
Oh, I love this. Like, who do I get to be right now? I'm Samuel Xavier Junk. I live here in Austin, Texas right now. And yeah, I'm a student of anthropology. I facilitate games of many sorts, mostly authentic relating games, or like games designed to like slow us down in connection so we can understand ourselves. And I feel like that's like a core part of who I am, is like understanding who I am in this context, and am I going to show up in a way that's congruent with my values? And like, what does that mean? Am I going to hide this part or show this part? Like, yeah, that feels like a really big part of who I am, like really playing with this human experience and playing it with other people so that we can better understand how we show up, and then like get more out of life, get more love and play. And I think my ethos right now is connection and freedom. So like whatever I need to do to create or facilitate connection and freedom, that's who I am and what I'm about. That's my mission here, is to create a world of connection and freedom.
What an intro. Will you share a little bit for people who are unfamiliar about what authentic relating games are?
Yeah, so I mentioned a little bit earlier, they're like these games designed to slow down connection. And there are lots of different ways to do it, lots of little tricks. But to me, it's like the word authentic is such a fucking charged word. When I first heard it, I'm like, fuck these guys. I ain't playing with them. I'm authentic as fuck. And then I'm like, wait, am I? And then so in these games, I get this opportunity to slow down and see, am I really being authentic? Is there more I want to share or less I want to share that feels good and congruent to me right now? And so in those games, we get to play with that. Like one of the agreements oftentimes is to lean into our edge. Sometimes for me, that looks like slowing down and not talking as much. For some people, that might look like speaking up a lot more than we're usually comfortable with, because maybe we withhold things that feel true to us. And so in those games, we set the container so we can play with showing up with more authenticity. And authenticity to me is like congruency with my values. And am I actually being authentic, or could I be a little bit more authentic? And how can I play with expressing that in a way that still feels good for other people to hear? And so we get to play with that a lot in authentic relating games. And that's why I have such fascination with it, because I used to be so socially awkward, or that was my judgment of myself. If you met me 5 years ago, I used to have crippling social anxiety. I had this fear of how I might be seen in public. When I would go to events, I would need to get there right when the event started so I could like get there with few amount of people as possible. I needed to have an out plan. I needed to know who I was with, and like we're staying for the whole show, right? Like I needed to have all of these like safety mechanisms, these ways out or these ways in. And I found that through practicing authentic relating games, I'm able to slow down enough to like get more in touch with my core needs and play with those in the game, so that in real life I can go and like have more freedom. I can go to an event and show up late. I can go to an event and show up by myself. And before, those things felt so fucking challenging. And through playing these games, like now it feels like it's just a thing. Like it comes up and I know the strategies now for how to maybe overcome them, or how to go through them and be with them while I'm still in connection with people. Instead of just like, I'm getting out of here and not saying anything to someone, being like, hey, I notice I'm feeling uncomfortable. Like my heart's kind of racing right now and I'm sweating a lot. And seeing how that lands, like, oh, you're fine. Like, I'm not worried about anything. Like slowing down enough to check in with people and realizing like, I'm okay. I'm safe. I'm okay to be here. And
Oof.
yeah.
How much of with social anxiety that we all experience in different ways and flavors, and I appreciate you being authentic about it rather than this imposter syndrome where we're all, oh, these other people and these people who seem to connect with people so easily and enjoyably, well, they never have anxiety about how the connection's going. Or so first, thank you for that part of it. And I'm curious what is this common thread of social anxiety? Is this a fear of judgment? Is it a shame? Is it these parts that we can't control how we're perceived? These parts where we're desiring connection? Like where do you feel like that's coming from?
Yeah, I think that the word change is coming to me right now. Like, can I change how I'm showing up in a way that makes you feel more comfortable with me being here? So I think the thing is like the thread that's going through is like, am I okay to be here?
Is it safe?
And
Like you said,
yeah,
safety.
yeah. Am I safe? Are you safe? Do you feel safe around me?
Mm.
And so it's like, well, how can I help people feel more safe? How can I feel more safe? Well, let's talk about how we're feeling.
Which is another part of the safety to slow down enough to check in, like you were saying, to say, hey, I'm noticing this happening. And also, like you brought up, to then notice how that's received. So maybe you're at some sort of social gathering and you say that to someone and their response feels sort of dismissive or not really great to you. Maybe then that would be more information or more feedback for you to say, you know, I feel like I need to go take care of this or that, or I have this need. Or you could be in another situation where someone says, oh, like, you know, do you want to take a walk, or do you want to take some deep breaths with me, or get some food here or something, and sort of go from there to keep navigating the situation.
Yeah,
Those
like
things are so much easier said than done of, you know, hey, just check in and say what you're noticing to people. And like you said, the importance of talking about and addressing the feelings happening physically.
yeah, I think that the games do a really good job, or at least some of the games I've been playing lately have been doing a really good job of like slowing things down. I've been playing this game lately called the noticing game, where we notice the physical layers of sensation first, and then we add the emotional affiliation with those sensations. And then the third is thoughts or stories. So like being here with you now, I'm noticing some like perspiration in my hands and I'm feeling a little bit of anxiety. And the story I have is like, I'm being recorded right now and something I say may get out to people. And for some reason, there's some anxiety about that. I could probably dive into more story, but that's like the premise of like that, using that tool in that way. I think in connection with other people, using that that dialogue back and forth, like hearing that, I notice feeling this, I'm feeling this, and this is the story I have, and then just going back and forth with that conversation and that structure, I think provides like, yeah, provides connection to how I'm actually feeling, what is actually true, and yeah, just connecting from there.
How does it feel to have addressed it and to have said, for the meta of said on the recording, hey, I'm aware I'm being recorded, and hey, I have this physical response to that happening? What is the change with addressing it for you?
Well, I noticed when you asked, I took a big deep breath and I sighed, and the emotion I'm feeling is more relaxed. And the story I have is that now that I've said it, I feel more comfortable and safe.
I feel that, and I appreciate that with how much I'm noticing and have noticed for my experience with this podcast as a whole. the intention behind it being that sort of safety in addressing in that authentic, vulnerable relating to say, I'm pretty sure to generalize about the human condition that all of us have some physiological response to, wait, I'm being recorded. This is going to go in public. Other humans are going to see this. What's happening here? Like, ah!
Yeah.
Rather than being like, no, I'm just like, this is how I look all the time. I woke up like this. I just always talk in this way. Like, duh.
Yeah. Yeah, I noticed when the little red light came on in my corner, it's like, there's an impact. There is an impact. And like, I don't know how much story I have around it other than like, is what I'm saying okay? And is it going to be perceived in a way that's, yeah, that feels good for other people? And I think context matters so much. One thing I really like about podcasting is it's generally long format, and it gives opportunity for these ideas to be a forum where we get to discuss what it is. Instead of saying it is this, we're like, oh, it's like this because this. Does that feel right for you? Oh, no, maybe, but it's like this. And so we have these, like, we're adding more context to create a statement or something that feels more true, that resonates between us. And that's what I fucking love podcasts. I think it's changing our culture in a way that's so necessary. It's changing, I think it's moving us away from, can you still hear me?
I can.
You could? Okay, I got a notification. Siri came on. She thought I was talking to her.
Hi, Siri.
That was...
Welcome to the show.
Don't say that, she'll get called on again. So I noticed getting a little distracted. I want to take a deep breath. And I don't remember exactly what I was talking about.
We were talking about noticing the light being recorded and how it's the feelings and the stories about how it will be perceived.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, like just I think the contexting was what I was.
That too, and how podcasting is long form. It's sometimes, so distractions can, I notice, often help slow things down more, because they come up and I'm like, oh, fuck you, distraction, you're taking up more time and space, what are you doing? And then I'm like, oh, you slowed me down. I'm like, okay.
Yeah, and part of my practice in like maturing as a human or figuring out how to human or adult is my ability to track conversation. So like, even if there's a distraction, being able to come back to what was happening right before that distraction and like get on with the conversation.
Totally.
And
well, you're talking about with change and how podcasts are changing our culture, and that long form discussion rather than, you know, a 60-second clip or just a little something that can be easier to misconstrue potentially, or maybe more challenging to have more intentionality with because it's so bite-sized.
Yeah, I think what I was getting at, you reminded me when you said this, like, I think the culture is getting away from soundbite culture and more into like long form culture. And I think a really good example of this, recently I watched a Joe Rogan podcast where he interviewed Mike Tyson. And this was just like a week or two ago. And Mike Tyson's training for a fight. And in the podcast, he talks about a lot of things. Joe asks him some good questions. And he says something about how it feels orgasmic to inflict pain on people. And if you take that out of context, it's like, oh, Mike Tyson's this monster. If you put it in context, you're like, wow, he's an artist, and he's an artist at fighting, about boxing. And I think it's so necessary to listen to the whole conversation before you soundbite it. But our lovely president decided to soundbite that part and post it onto his Twitter. He literally posted a clip of Mike Tyson talking about how orgasmic it felt to hurt people. He just posted that clip on his Twitter with no context, just that clip. And I'm like, how can you do that? How can you like, how it like
the context of the hurt that human is creating to jump in about hurt and context.
Yeah, and so it brings that question like, well, what is our president getting at when he says that? Who is he talking about hurting? What is he saying? Like, and I think it's I don't want to get too into politics, but I think just professionally, I don't think it's good to do things out of context. And I think it takes away from like the beauty of what Mike Tyson is and what he was doing. And I see him as being incredibly inspirational, seeing his transformation, and to like pull that soundbite out might perpetuate the culture of him being this monster that I don't think he really is. And so, yeah, I'm just like weary of soundbite culture, and I want there to be more long format. I think it lets the people talk it out, and I want people to be talking it out.
Mm. How do you feel like intentionality relates to context?
Yeah, so I think one of the most important things when communicating with anyone or doing anything that involves other people is what's your intention. And I think that that's a context that matters so much, because some people might think that your intention is to harm them or something. And I think it's important to share, like, hey, my intention wasn't that. My intention was this. Um, and yeah, just to like context the intention more, I think could give that person maybe a more empathetic view of how you were experiencing things, and that could lead to more understanding. And while I don't think that's like the formula I would go about, like I wouldn't share my intention when someone's like, hey, I'm feeling hurt. I wouldn't say, oh, my intention wasn't to hurt you. I would empathize with them first. Like, oh, I'm hearing that was hurtful when I said this. And I imagine that was hurtful because of these things. And then once they feel really understood, then I would seek to be understood. And I think that part of like creating psychological safety is empathizing and making sure someone else is understood first. And when I'm feeling understood, I feel more safe and more open to hearing how you're feeling. And like, well, like, what was your intention in sharing that? Like, oh, your intention was that. Oh, I understand you more. Yeah, I'm not taking it as personally because this was your intention. And so I think the context matters so much, and intention is context so much.
Ooh, intention is context. How does that relate to social anxiety then with you too? I'm noticing for me, feeling and seeing ways that social anxiety was stronger for me when I felt less intentionality or more unsure, and so more unsafe about the context of some sort of social gathering.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think this comes up a lot for me when I go out to shows where there's music on. Most of the time, my intention is to dance and connect with people. And so like I'm remembering my intention is to dance when I'm connecting with people, and when it's not feeling good for me, I'm like, oh, I'm noticing I'm out of alignment here. I'm going to go dance because that feels more comfortable for me.
Mm-hmm.
And I think like checking in with myself when I'm with people, what was my intention in being here? And am I in alignment? And if not, I think that I'd be respecting myself and the other participant more if I was honest about where my attention is. And I think my attention goes where, oh, how does it go? My attention goes where the energy flows, something like that. But I wanted to use the word intention in there too.
Energy goes where attention flows, or maybe
Yeah,
intention flows where your intention.
yeah. I think my energy flows where, like, how do I say this?
You can only say it correctly.
Yeah, my intention is like, my intention is kind of like this, like steady, this like axis
An
mundi.
anchor.
Like, yeah, it's this anchor. And if I'm noticing that my attention is not with my intention, that's that moment to like realign, take a deep breath, and go get on the dance floor or whatever it is.
I love that. I want to reiterate for slowing down. When your attention is not with your intention, when you notice a separation of your attention and your intention, then that coming back to say, my intention here is to dance. My intention is to have my attention on my intention. Words are such fuck with fun.
Yeah. Yeah, and it really comes down to like that moment when you notice there's incongruency. That's that moment for me to choose and to have that choice
The
to
choice
change something. Yeah, the choice to change. And I can change by moving my body or saying some words, and I can do things that'll pull me into higher alignment, such as like shutting up and breathing and getting on the dance floor. I love the dance floor. That's my safe place
Mm.
because that's my intention most of the time.
Is to be dancing and in movement.
Yeah, at least when I go out to events, especially.
Yeah. Because it feels fun and it feels safe and
Yeah, it feels like I can't fuck it up.
Does it feel authentic to you for your own authentic relating and authentic relating to yourself?
Yeah, I think that for me, some of my highest form of expression has been contact improvisation dancing. And that feels like one of the ways that I can most truly express myself and most authentically express myself in contact with another person, getting feedback, receiving it, and giving feedback non-verbally.
All in
That
real
feels
time.
all in real time. That feels the most comfortable for me. Well, contact improv doesn't always feel comfortable for me, but it's a framework that I know how to work with really well.
It's like scaffolding learning. It gives a safe context. It gives a safe intention of a supportive system to
Yeah,
then explore.
contact. Yeah. Yeah. And I think, yeah, contact improvisation for me is like, oh, even just saying it, I'm like thinking about maybe doing some of that tonight and feeling really excited about connecting with some friends later. And just remembering like it's such a core part of who I am is dancing because it feels comfortable and because it feels like I can't not be authentic. Like my body shows it. My body, like I feel it and I like grapple with like coming into alignment and all these moments. And that's like the fun of dancing is like hearing the music and then like putting my intention like in alignment with my body and the music and like finding the next beat, finding the high notes and the low notes and like playing and moving with it all. It's so much fun.
Mm. There's a lot of intentionality in it. And I feel that too with when it's goofy too to be podcasting and talking about that feeling, that moment of that's so on the other end of the spectrum here from all of this words and heady talking and all of how do we change our stories and our mindset, which is, okay, how do I change the positions of my body? How do I change my communication, my call and response to these sounds that I'm hearing to flow, to move, to participate in whatever this collective intention is. And I'm noticing my own insecurity of like, oh, you sound so heady and hippie here, and men, like, oh, dance and movement.
And you know, I hear that and I feel excited because I think dance is universal. I think everyone knows how to dance. Everyone
Yep.
knows how to sing. Maybe we think we don't, but innately, I think we all do. And I'm still getting along with, I'm still learning the singing part. Like, I wish I was as comfortable singing as I am moving. But for me, movement is such like a universal way to connect with people. And so that's another reason why it feels comfortable is like words don't matter. And I can just shut up and move. And like, if I'm slowing down enough, I can pay attention to someone else, get feedback like, oh, like I stepped closer to someone and they stepped away. So maybe that's a sign they don't want to dance with me. Or I stepped towards them and they didn't move away, but they made some eye contact. So now they're paying attention to me. If I want to dance with them, I'm going to move a little bit closer. I'm going to pay attention to what their body's doing. And if they don't move, I might make a move to get a little bit closer and make it known that I'm coming towards them with my body and my energy. And if they're maintaining eye contact, then I know it's generally pretty safe and that they're going to move away if they don't want it. And so I get to like play in this dance and like, then I get to project like, okay, I think they're going to move in that direction and I want to be in contact with them. So I'm going to put myself in the way, but with enough room for them to decide if they don't want to connect with me or not. And if they do, then it's like an offering. I'm like offering contact with myself and then they can collide if they want. And we can dance from there. It's like this nonverbal communication that I feel way more comfortable with. It seems way more somatic or like way more like embodied to me than like, hey, does this feel okay? Can I touch you? Like all those things, like to me, like almost like take away from the present moment. And like we get in our heads. And for me, coming into alignment most certainly means coming into alignment with my body and feeling congruency in my body. And so dancing is like a really easy way for me to feel that feedback for sure.
And practice that other type of communication and interaction.
Mm-hmm.
I like using the word offering too, and I'm curious, does an intention to you feel like an offering? I was hearing a lot of this sort of offering this intention of, hey, I'm interested in dancing with you, other human, if you want to dance, or we could dance together, we could do this, and putting that out as an offering to then say, oh, do you also have the same intention for us to communicate?
Yeah, I think it makes it abundantly clear. Like when all else fails, like if my words ever fail, I can always go to the nonverbal signs of communication. And if I can have high attunement to that, then I can start tuning in my words to facilitate more connection. And so I think that, yeah, studying nonverbal communication is like, it's so important. And I'm in a linguistic anthropology class right now. And I think we're getting to that part. I think this next week is gestures and other signs of nonverbal communication. And I'm so curious about it.
Because of how little of communication is about the words, she says on a podcast.
Yeah.
Which goes back to the thing you were saying about the noticing game and the checking in on your body, and to relate it to the change that our bodies are going through all of these changes all the time. And as much as we can get into all of these heady or get into these very embodied physical things, we all need to pee, we all get hungry, we all have these changes that come up in cycles of, oh, I'm noticing my heart rate is going faster now. Oh, I'm noticing I'm sweatier now, or I'm less sweaty, or I'm hot, or I'm cold, or there is this very physical part that there's no getting around.
Yeah, and I think that words are this magical way of communicating meaning in a way that sometimes is so much quicker at getting to the heart of it. Like, hey, I have to go pee. It's pretty universal in English. Like that means that I'm going to leave I'm going to leave right here with my body and I'm going to go do that thing. And so like, I love how words can we can talk about more complex things than just like, you know, it's like, there's so many ways. It's almost like we're limited by our bodies to communicate, and we can communicate these really large, complex ideas and string different contexts together to create bigger meanings. And it's like, to me, that's like the energy of the magician, is like taking someone from point A to point B, or maybe point A to point C, and going to B, B, A, B, like going to all these points, but getting into that other idea and stringing along these contexts to create meaning that maybe we didn't have shared between us before. I'm a nerd for this stuff.
I am too. I love it. And I love too the yes and the other side of that, like you were saying, which is there's also things that words fall short of, that cannot be communicated in words, that are perhaps why dance and song and laughter are universal, because words are this magical magician energy of things, and also words have limitations, and movement and a smile and eye contact is this magical magician-y thing. Like one of the biggest authentic relating games that I feel everyone has some little experience with is prolonged eye contact. And then noticing all of the social anxieties and the awkwardness and the feelings and physical sensations, and noticing what comes up when you're like, this person is staring at my pupils for more than 3 seconds. What's happening here?
Yeah. And I feel inspired to share a little bit about what empathy means to me and how it kind of plays into this. I once asked, I think I asked on Facebook, like, what does empathy mean? Knowing that I was going to get all these responses, and knowing that we might not have shared meaning, but I want to create some culture, some shared meaning around what this word empathy is. And someone told me that...
What a beautiful intention too, to pause and slow that down.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And I think the analogy someone gave me is that I really liked, is that empathy is like walking 1,000,000 miles in someone else's shoe, or painting a picture of someone else's reality, knowing that you're never, ever going to get it just right. And it was, when I heard that, it was like a depth charge. It was like, whoa, like I can only imagine what it's like to be you. I can never really ever know. You can use these words to try and get me to kind of get what you're saying or what you're feeling, but I'll never really be able to like put on your shoes and feel them the way that you do. And there's a really long YouTube lecture of Marshall Rosenberg talking about empathy in a nonviolent communication seminar he did. And someone asked him, well, when do you know, how did that question go? When do you stop empathizing? Like, when do you know that you've given enough empathy to like move on to the next step, which is usually like strategizing or something like that? And he said, oh, you count to 1,000,000. And I was just like, what? Like, what do you mean count to 1,000,000? It's like, oh, you really try and get their world. You'll know when it's necessary to move on to strategizing. And I think it's like, it's so important to like slow down and really get someone else's world. When they're feeling understood, you'll know. And maybe you count to 1,000,000 and it never happens. And then you don't move to the next step of the nonviolent communication protocol or consciousness. Like, you don't just, okay, I'm noticing this, I'm feeling this, can you that? It's like, whoa. Can we understand what that feeling is and why you're feeling that? And all the different stories and things that are coming in, because that's going to inform me on how to interact with you and how to create more shared understanding. And that's so important. I think empathy is like, it's so great. And it's this art that is inherently imperfect. I'm never going to be perfect at empathizing. And that's like the nature of it. It's like, it's not perfect. You're just imagining, knowing that you're probably getting it wrong at least a little bit.
Which is a very beautifully empathetic intention, is a lot of what I'm hearing there, to say, how do I empathize with this basic human truth that is, we all feel grief, we all feel happiness, sadness, all of these things. And also we all feel them only through one human suit. And I will never be in someone else's human suit to feel exactly what it feels like inside of them. And how it's both true that we have these universal experiences and also it's so individualized. And then how do we respect that and have honor and grace for that, to say, I hear you, I see you, I know what you're feeling, and also I know that I don't know what you're feeling because I'm not you.
And just to create enough shared understanding so that they feel safe enough to like move forward. Like, there was a conflict and now I'm understanding why there was a conflict for you. And with that information, like, do you feel safe enough to come up with a strategy so that it doesn't happen again? And yeah, when I get introduced, I want to introduce myself as a practitioner of nonviolent communication. I think that's like that's like my core of like my relating to the world, is this form of communication it's not, they say nonviolent. I also like to just call it compassionate communication.
For a more positive label rather than a non-something. As soon as you said that too, for the first time ever in my life, I was like, why do we have something that's called non-violent? That's, if anything, that is in the name building in that this intention, or not. It almost feels like saying, oh, well, in human history, communication has been violent. So we're creating this intention for something that is not how humans have been communicating, which is violently with each other.
Yeah, it kind of reminds me of that, like the charge that I got when I heard the word authentic relating games. It's like, am I not always doing that? When I think of NVC, I think, wait, are you saying that I'm being violent? Fuck you, right? There comes the violence.
Violence.
Yeah.
I'm not being violent, you're being violent.
Yeah, and so I think that some of these words in their or some of these cultures in their inception have amazing intentions. Like Marshall Rosenberg's intentions was to create a world of more compassionate communication. And at least I imagine that's what his intention was. And for authentic relating games, their intention was to create more authenticity. But do those initial words actually like inhibit that from happening because of, or prohibit that from happening because of the cultural shared meaning of what those words are and how like the context is set up?
Totally. I love your willingness to get into all the nitpickiness of the intentions of these words and how it's set up, and also to remember these are words. These are labels that we're using to point towards things.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And that's why I think words are so great. Like I'm such a somatic being. I feel so deeply. And I love talking. I love talking so much. The reason I'm going to school for anthropology is because I want to be a professor and I want to profess what I believe to be truth. And I want to take people, I want to be that master magician that takes people from point A to point Z and all the places in between and create this, like all this more meaning so that we have shared meaning at the end. And that's like, it's such like it's such wizardry. I love it.
To have the intention be shared meaning, which to me, what I'm hearing with that is creating a shared physical experience, that it is a somatic change. Like you're not, if someone just hears a word that goes in and out, that's very different from a physiological response.
Yeah. Yeah, it's like, how can I use these words to change how I'm feeling or you're feeling to a way that feels good? More joy, less pain. That's generally what I want. I'm going to the old Ram Dass, like all the way down is like my intention for most things is more joy, less pain. But then I'm like, wait, less pain. If there's less pain, that means there's less joy.
Ooh, well, this gets into the idea of suffering and what's suffering or pain versus discomfort and all of these word labels for maybe what we're allowed to feel. I hear you on that, and this is definitely something I feel like I've been sitting with a lot too, of this paradox again of accepting that suffering and pain is part of life. Growing pains, for growth to be there, there's going to be pain. And also more joy. And hey, I feel more joyful when I focus on more joy. And hey, when I really sit back here, the suffering part of this life thing is way smaller than the joy part.
And yeah, I question like how much of suffering is necessary for us to feel joy. Like
some amount, I know some amount of it is. And in my experience, it's way less than I have previously believed.
Yeah, I think that like it's less about how much pain, and I think it's more about how much do we listen to that pain.
Say more on that.
Yeah, so I think like a little bit of suffering, like I fucked up on this lesson, like I did something wrong. And it's not that, like I don't need to like mull it over and just keep on feeling that. If I just change the future and change what my behaviors are, like I could create so much more joy. And so instead of just like wallowing in my own self-pity or just like bad self-talk, I could go and just change and feel more joy and less pain. But I think that for me, pain is such a motivating factor. Shame, embarrassment, those things are huge motivators in my system. And go ahead.
Oh, yeah, thank you. Okay. Shame is ineffective is a word mantra I have been giving feeling and intention and attention to. And shame and guilt are very different. Of guilt being about I did something bad, and shame being about I am bad. And
yeah, that's the distinction.
Me, the intention behind changes, if it has any root in I am bad, it feels bad. It feels like the change doesn't stick, the change doesn't feel authentic, the change feels forced, it feels bad, for lack of a better word, rather than okay, maybe there's this guilt about something, and so that can navigate me towards feeling good. I love you. I love Ram Dass. I love you bringing up that very simple intention. And part of what I love about so many of his quotable things of love people and tell the truth, of these super simple intentions that are using words. I mean, part of why Be Here Now tattooed on me, to use words to still get to that really basic, stripped away intention of being in your body, of feeling the somatic experience and being authentic about it, rather than being like, no, I'm fine, I'm chill, like my shoulders are just up by my ears, of how this is where they are. Like,
yeah, I really love Ram Dass, and I love that these little clips of him I think can lead us to more peace.
For
And I think
soundbite culture too,
yeah,
like it can be
yeah. And I think that like there's something to be said about the nature of dualism, and how like at least for me, I've been exploring this topic of like the more that sorrow carves into my being, the more joy I may contain. And that's a quote from the prophet Khalil Gibran. Wrote an amazing poem that touched me in my darkest hour. I was, for the first time in my life a couple of years ago, I was having suicidal ideations and was like, why am I suffering so fucking much? Like, this sucks, just fucking end it. And my coach and mentor gave me this poem, and it gave me like purpose to my suffering. And the poem says like, how does it go? Yeah, just the more that sorrow carves into my being, the more joy I may contain. That's like the headline of it for me. And it's really just getting at like, I'm suffering so that I can appreciate life a lot more. And when I come out of this like dip, then I'm going to have a higher high because I had a lower low. But I don't like the dualist. I don't like that because like, I don't think that much suffering is necessary for me to feel this high. But do I know that's this high? Like, how do I know that's there? Is it because I felt that low? Like, fuck that. Fuck dualism.
Oof, I really appreciate, I love that quote a lot, and that change of perspective on suffering, and also using suffering, having an intention with suffering to say, even just to give it the option to say, well, maybe it is creating more space for more love and more growth and more learning and more connection with people. I feel this bond and this connection that comes through suffering, through the shared experience of having suffered, having felt sad, down, disconnected. I really appreciate also you sharing vulnerably about feeling suicidal and normalizing that suffering, that level of what is my intention for being here? Did I choose to be here? What am I doing here? Is this worth it for me to stay here? And normalizing those thoughts and those feelings that come up, that similarly to the thing of, oh, I'm noticing I have this sensation about being recorded that I really do feel are so much more commonplace than people often want to share, because maybe it's scary or it feels like uncool or unsexy or whatever to say, hey, I've thought about not being here as a human. I'm aware I have that option. I've gotten to that point. And then also just in saying that, right, for someone else who has had that experience listening to this episode to say, wow, I've also contemplated ending my life, or I've also felt like this is too much suffering. Like, what the fuck? Wow, here's these two other people who've had a similar lived experience, who in that suffering we can be connected to say that, well, we don't know how it feels for someone else, that we've had some shared feeling. And there's something so darkly beautiful of like, you felt suicidal before, I felt suicidal before. You're human, I'm a human. What?
Yeah, and I think humans are really like, we're this incredible force. Like, millions of years of evolution have been survive. And we can hijack millions of years of evolution and say, I don't want that anymore. Jump off the cliff. Like, we have that option. And I think that goes to show how powerful we are as humans, that we can create this meaning. And for me, getting out of that despair, that darkness, was about creating meaning. It was about creating a meaning for that suffering. And when I had that understanding, even if it's just this like cognitive like play of mind, like, oh, like I'm doing this because I had a because, I was able to like get out of it. And because I had a why, I knew how. And I think that that's a Nietzsche quote. It goes like, he who knows his why can bear any how. And I'm like, yes, like find my fucking purpose. And then anything else like doesn't fucking matter. I can put myself through it because I know why. And if I can find something that I'm so devout about, that can like, I want to continue to find that thing that I'm so connected to, that it can help me bear any amount of discomfort. And if I can get connected to that why every single day, then the how doesn't matter. Like, I just fucking do it, and I sit with whatever comes up around not wanting to do this or not wanting to do that. Like, I can do that. I can so do that.
I'm so glad you shared that quote. That's one of my favorites, and I'm pretty sure that's its first ever being shared on the podcast.
Yes.
And it's so related to intentionality. What is your why? And changing and remembering too, like you're saying, of hijacking that free will and all of these questions that potentially we never get to know the answers to, or we only get to know little bits of the answers to, that we can change our perception of it, that we can choose, that for all of these C's that you're talking about, compassionate communication of what is our intention. The other thing too, when you were saying that came up for me, and I was an astrology language head of all of my very Capricornian, utilitarian, workaholic-y things, is to say, how do we give suffering a job? Suffering, if it just is out there floating around being suffering, in my experience, takes up so much space and attention and intention, and is just flailing around, and it's a beautiful, creative, intense force that, how do we channel it into dance, into authentic relating games, into a podcast, into something to sound like me 5 years ago would have been like, what the fuck, Annie? To alchemize it, to alchemize that suffering.
Yeah, I love that. Giving the suffering a job.
It's and like, I think like picture it like at a job interview, and the suffering comes in, and it's like, well, this is part of how I know how to empathize with other humans. And my skills include crying and hyperventilating. And I'm really good at either under-eating or overeating.
Oh, I love that. Yeah, I think for me, like, suffering's job is to create less of it. And I think that's kind of like...
Say that again!
I think that suffering's job is to create less of it. And
will you say it one more time?
Siri thinks that I'm talking to them.
Hey, Siri.
I'm curious what word it is that I'm saying that is triggering her, because I said it just happened 3 times in a row. But I think I was saying something about, like, for me, suffering's job is to create less suffering, which in a way is kind of like sad for the suffering. It's like, hey, I'm coming here to create less of me. If it comes to the interview, like, I'm coming here because I don't want to be here. I don't know. There's something about that. Like,
well, I like that, because part of too what we're getting at here is the intention with suffering, right? Do we and changing our perception of it, our intention of it, do we acknowledge the suffering, or do we act like it's not there?
Yeah, I want to be honest about the suffering, because I suffer a lot. And I think when I can be honest about that, I think for other people, they're like, whoa, I was feeling that too. And you said it. And now I'm feeling more safe because I'm suffering. And now I know that, yeah, there's like a way out.
how do suffering and safety feel related to you? Like, does suffering feel like the sense of safety not being there?
Mm. Yeah, can the two coexist in the same room?
Ooh. Ooh, I love that. In my experience, yes, and also not well. As soon as I
Yeah.
asked that question to you and getting to reflect that, to me, a big part of suffering is this sense that my safety is being challenged. And again, for this very somatic and physical sensations, anxiety and depression, it's this sense of feeling physically unsafe in either the people I'm around, the environment I'm in maybe feeling unsafe that I'm not gonna have a place to sleep or food or my access to basic resources, my access to an ability to take care of myself. I'm also very much seeing Maslow's pyramid in my head, and that's sort of how safety and suffering relates to that, and then the layers of emotional safety and spiritual safety and feeling. Well, okay, also, as I'm saying all this out loud, there's the part of safety that is knowing that safety is an illusion, and then feeling
Yeah.
more safe in remembering, okay, cool, all of this is real, and also, like, what the fuck does that even mean that you're safe? Or, like, I'm
Yeah.
holding space for you. This is an open and safe space. It's like, fuck, like,
Yeah.
go stick a dildo up your ass. Like, I
Yeah.
can't, like, I love you, person who says
Yeah.
that, and also,
Yeah. So yeah, I like to say, and I love that you mentioned that because I was gonna say like safety isn't real. And I have a friend who's recently like kind of coached me through understanding that. And you can't create a safe space, but I think what we can help create is a brave space because the world's not safe.
that's so cute.
And like we can create this illusion of safety, but it's an illusion. Or we can create this feeling of being brave and knowing that the world isn't safe and choosing to be there anyways. And that's what I want to create. I want to create circles where you feel comfortable being brave, knowing that, like you could go into a plant medicine journey and they create this container and they're like, this is a safe container. I'm like, well, like it's not really safe, but I'm going in knowing that these things could show up and I'm willing to, my intention is to be here through it. Like, I don't need it to be safe. I need to know that I'm going to do it. Or I'm going to show up for whatever it is that comes up. And yeah, I think safety is like the way that I heard it from my friend. We were in a conversation with a group of people that he didn't know, I kind of knew, and they're talking about safety. And he's like, whoa, wait, safety's not real. And then he starts talking and then they're just like, what? Safety's not real? Like, fuck you. And he's like, no. Like, it's not real. It's this and like, they had a hard time following his thread. So I think that's a part of like the authentic relating, like the attunement. We have different shared meanings on what safety is. And we just said it. And now he's going on assuming that they know, and he didn't have that 2 minute to like enough to slow down and realize there wasn't shared meaning there. And then we tried to create shared meaning about what safety was, and we couldn't do it because it's not fucking real. I was like, dang it. Like it was a really cool like social experiment in a way, like, or I guess just like thing for me to observe was like seeing how maybe talking about these constructs, like it's almost like pulling the rug out from under something, like saying safety isn't real. It's like, but all the facilitators and all the people told me safety is real. And I think I think it's more challenging knowing that it's not real and that I need to be brave.
Mm. And also that sense too that challenges safety, that says, wait a minute, I thought we all were perceiving this word as the same way I was perceiving this word. And you mean to tell me that you perceive this word differently? Like, what, like,
Yeah.
now that we've slowed down enough to recognize that, now what? Like, what does that even mean? Or where do we go from there? What do you feel about in terms of the word supportive? Does that feel related to safety to you, or does that feel like part of safety or part of these, can we have supportive spaces?
Yeah, I think support. Yeah, I definitely want to create more supportive spaces. I think that like recognizing that maybe there's not safety, um, is like a really, really great for a facilitator. I think that there's something that happens in facilitation so often that I cringe at. It's so cringeworthy. They're like, I'm creating a judgment-free zone. I'm like, judgment-free? You mean you can turn those off?
You're like, I'm judging what you're saying because it's factually inaccurate. You're a human.
Yeah, I'm like, yeah, we're not going to judge each other. You can share whatever you want. It's like, what? Are you bypassing the fact that our words have impact? Like, there's impact here, and like we're gonna have judgments based on that, and like
We have
that's who
preconceived notions.
Yeah, and I think it's just, I think it's silly, and I've done it. I do it too. Like, but I think it is silly to do that.
Because it feels like perhaps an inauthentic intention.
Yeah, absolutely.
Do you think that that comes from this idea of I'm going to create an illusion of safety by, well, people are feeling social anxiety because they're feeling insecure about being judged. So if I tell people it's a judgment-free zone, then they'll feel safe. And then it ends up being that people feel less safe, in my experience, because I'm like, wait, you're lying to me. This isn't a judgment-free zone. We're all humans here. Like, don't tell me you don't have judgments.
Yeah, and it's
do you
kind of
act on them, or do you talk about them? Are you honest about them?
Yeah, and it's kind of like feeling out the room. Like, is this room ready for me to like change that paradigm? Or are they working on this other paradigm that I need to be sensitive to? And I really want to tune myself to all of those things. Like, I don't want to just start the workshop by saying this isn't a safe container because safety is false. Right?
I want to go to that workshop where someone's like, this is an illusion. This is a workshop on how safety is an illusion.
Yeah. Because like a meteor could come, right? I mean, that's just like a really easy way for me to think about it. But like some kind of external environmental thing might come in, and we can't create a safety from that. We can try really good. And I think that's what's really important. When I hear I'm creating a safe container, what I'm hearing is that there's an intention to create safety, to create that feeling of okayness. And so I hear the intention. Part of being a practitioner of nonviolent communication for me is hearing the needs beneath someone's words. And when I hear someone say something, imagining what they actually meant.
What was their intention, and how can we be open to maybe their intention is different from how you're receiving and perceiving it?
Yeah. Like if I hear someone say like, I'm creating a safe container, I might respond by like, hey, I noticed when you shared you're creating a safe container, I'm feeling some like constriction in my chest, and I noticed like feeling some frustration and confusion. I really need clarity and shared meaning on what that means. Are you open to maybe creating some shared meaning around that? And like opening up a dialogue for that. I love that.
I do too, and I love seeing and hearing more people do that and take the time to do that and have more support externally to do that. Because I feel like, again, for that part of slowing down, I wonder how much of safety I'm noticing for me is this idea that there's not enough time, there's not enough space, and there's a limited resource of time and space, and so the safety feeling to say we can slow down, to really say, hey, what did you mean by that? Or hey, I was feeling like maybe you meant this, or I'm noticing this come up when you say this, and it's okay for us to take a pause here and check in, and like you were saying, that safety that is an okayness.
Yeah, like I want to check in and make sure that they weren't saying I'm creating safety and like it's a facade. Like they know that there's not safety. I want to know like if they know that or not, because that's going to help me feel more safe. And like just knowing just like the meta context or meta awareness around those things, it's like it's really nuanced. This stuff really is super nuanced, and I think it's those nuances that make for a more skilled facilitator or just practitioner in anything. Is like, how do I master these nuances of connection and communication, because they do matter, whether or not we like believe it or not. The sounds that we make elicit responses in other people's nervous systems. And the way we say them matters a lot, and how we say them, like around like what other words, changes the meaning so much. And I think it's so important, especially in creating like safe containers.
quote unquote safe.
Yeah.
Mm. Intentionality and authenticity also really seem more synonymous than I feel. I feel like this conversation has changed my perception of those words and how they are connected.
Yeah, I think we're digging into some of the nitty-gritty things that I am so passionate about. I'm really happy to be on this platform with you talking about it, because this is like my core passion, is understanding how to communicate and connect. And I'm learning about it through connecting with you. I love your humaning, like the way that you view like the questions you ask, your curiosities. And so getting to play with it with someone who has like a critical eye for nuance, it's like, it's really helpful in like helping me understand what these things even are.
Same to you, and thank you for your openness to playing and your openness to the questions, and how we, as two people in a conversation, how do we find the overlaps in our intention and where it goes.
Yeah.
Which is part of, I feel like, this authentic waiting is saying, okay, how do I be authentic in me and stay in me while you're being authentic and staying in you, and seeing where we overlap and where it's different. And
Mm-hmm.
I'm noticing too this feeling of where there's the level of duality that comes in with relating and changing and intention, where there is sort of this 0-1 yes or no of either you're connecting, you're in it, or you're not. And you can be aware of it, which then is its own way of connecting, of like, oh, I'm noticing that like my head just went here, or that I was going to this thing, or like this constant sort of toggling.
Yeah,
Dancing, we're back to dancing.
We're noticing our noticing.
The meta continues.
Yeah, and I love that. Like, and I notice, I keep on thinking back to this judgment thing. Like I think there's something here that I want to share. I'm not sure exactly what it is, but I noticed my thought kept on going back to judgment. And I think it's important for me to share, because then I'll know it better or something. But yeah, judgment for me is like, yeah, it's my projection of what I believe is going to happen next, or what I believe about you or about me. And I think that judgments and assumptions are something that we all do all the time. And so to say I'm creating a safe, judgment-free zone is essentially saying like, hey, we're not gonna allow ourselves to feel these things or do these things that are innate to our being. And I feel a lot of caution around it. And I see why people do it, because if you say, yeah, what am I? Oh, you said it loud enough for her to hear that time.
Oh, ear C.
Yeah, like I think just creating places where people know, hey, it's okay to have judgments, and it's a way for us to learn about each other. Like
and ourselves too. Where is that judgment coming from? What is this story?
Yeah, one of my good friends says, like, if you hear a judgment from someone, just one person, maybe you can shrug it off. If you hear it from two people, maybe you should look at it. If you hear it from 3 or more people, that's your shadow. And you probably should look at that. It's probably true. And a process that I've been a part of in some of the men's groups I'm a part of, I'm an initiate of the Mankind Project. And one of the processes that we do is called your gold, your shadow. And they sit you in a seat and they tell you what your gold is. What are my judgments about you that I believe to be good? And you sit there and you receive it. You give them clear consent to give you those judgments and those projections. And whatever fits, and you take it home. Whatever doesn't fit, and you leave it. And then there's the time for the shadow. And I get to hear other people's raw, candid, like experiences of how I showed up. And I think that for me, sitting down and listening to those judgments has been incredibly, incredibly growthful. I heard about the way that I speak and the stories that I tell that aren't actually congruent. And in that specific weekend that I'm remembering, like I learned that I'm a lot better than I think I am. And that was my shadow. It's like, I tell this story that I'm this young person that's not competent, but really I'm extremely competent. And so I heard this. I heard this judgment, and it was, yeah, challenging for me to hear, but really great for me to step into. Like, I can be competent. I am competent. But I
Was
had
it
this story.
reflecting, oh, pardon my,
Go for it, please.
was it reflecting back to you your own internal judgments, your own inner critic, and that voice that says, I'm not enough, I'm not doing enough, I'm too young, I'm too ignorant, I'm hearing a lot of your internal suffering and that human part for all of us that wants to stay in our pity party and, oh, woe is me, and all of this suffering getting reflected to you to say, hey, maybe you could change that, or you could choose to focus on these other things. Or it's like the thing too where, you know, it's like you have one pimple or one stain on your whatever, and you're like, oh my God, everyone's noticing this. And someone else is like, literally no one else is paying attention to that. Like, look at all of the rest of you and how much more you have to offer.
Yeah.
And you're
And
focusing on this little suffering here.
And that, I think what I really wanted to get, or what I wanted to extract from this, is that judgments can be incredibly helpful and healing. And
I love you, judgments. How do we love you more? And
yeah, and
accept
like,
you and set the intention that judgments are okay. And also, like you're saying, how do we learn from it?
yeah, like, I want to create brave spaces where our judgments are okay and that we can learn from our judgments. Because I believe that, you know, I want to show up in the world in a way that feels good for other people. Mostly. I don't really want to challenge people all the time.
Is that because that feels good for you? Like the altruism that is selfish for all of us because it feels good for you to show up in ways that feel good for other people?
I think so. I think that my core mission, my core values, like, I believe aren't just good for me, but I believe they're good for the whole world.
Want to treat people how you want to be treated. And that
The
intention.
golden rule. That's like,
I also,
I think
my head went to you facilitating an event in the future saying, this is a judgment okay zone. My name is Samuel Jung.
your judgments are welcome here.
Yeah, I love your judgments. They're beautiful.
Yeah, and I often, I've cringed, and I've tried to give people feedback on this before too. I have a friend who facilitates a men's group, and he always says this is a judgment-free zone. And I've told him, I'm like, dude, this is not a judgment-free zone. I'm judging you right now. I'm judging everything. I'm judging you as great. I think you're fucking awesome. That's a judgment. That's a projection. And to say it's judgment-free is, to me, being dishonest. What I think you mean is, this place is, it's okay for you to have whatever feelings or stories you want. And I'm not going to reject you or kick you out of the group for sharing that. I think that's what it's saying. It's like, I'm not going to judge you in a way that's going to remove you from here.
Which is
This
back to safety.
yeah, you're safe here, right? Yeah.
Whoa. How does intention and judgment relate to you? I have no idea. That's why I'm asking you.
Intention and judgment.
Because judgments sort of come up on their own from your experience, from your conditioning. Like,
Yeah.
I guess as I'm asking it, maybe the intentionality that comes up is how we respond to the judgment. It's like the judgment is that reaction, and then our response is our intention, that compass, that anchor.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I think that judgments are normal. Judgments are healthy.
You're okay, human.
Yeah. And intention, like, my intention is to create spaces where that's possible, where you can express your judgments in a way that, like, can be constructive, or if it doesn't fit, I'm going to throw it out. Like, I'm going to have this shield on when you make your judgments about me. And the shield is not actually completely solid. It has this mesh on it. And I'm going to let you throw your projections all over me. And if it fits, I'm going to take it. If it doesn't, then it's going to not go through the mesh, and it's going to be protected. And so it's like this, like, spiritual metaphor for, like, a shield that I have on all the time. And I can let things land, or I could let them not.
You can consciously choose your changes for compassionate communication.
Bam, bam, bam.
Nerd words, woo!
Nerd words.
Mm. I really appreciate getting to talk about talking with you. and changes and relating and relate about relating and go into all of these metas. And I look forward to podcasting with you again. I look forward to virtual relating and your in-person relating games and how you connect that with anthropology. I'm so excited to get to watch it all and participate.
Yeah. Heck yeah. I'm so happy to have been here. And yeah, I want to have you on my podcast soon. I want to give a little plug. My podcast, I have a lot in the making. A lot of them are going to be released very soon. I'm really excited about it.
Yeah,
The
where
name
can
of the
people
podcast,
find you? I'll put all your stuff in the description box too of this episode.
Sweet. So the name of the podcast is called The Story of Us with Samuel Junk. And you can find it on Spotify, iTunes, and where else? YouTube. I'm working on the Google Play. That one's a little more challenging for me, or it was. Maybe I'll figure that out by the time this is out, though. And you can find me on Instagram. I believe my Instagram handle is @SamuelJunk. I believe. There's not that many junks out there, so.
It'll all be linked in this description so people can find it and find you.
Awesome.
I really appreciate your time to come on and to relate and your intention to be curious and open and to love words and also be like, these are words. What are we doing here?
Yeah. It's all just a play. It's a dance. We just did contact dance with words.
Verbal contact improv. Oh, I love you, dude. I really appreciate your time and energy here.
Oh, I love you too, Annie.
Thank you so much for coming on and sharing.
Heck yeah. We'll do it again.
We'll do it again. Thank you for tuning in, and thanks for being you.